Hey everyone, and welcome back to Salesforce Mojo. Today we're going to set up checkout in B2B Commerce LWR. So if you're wondering what are the steps it takes to actually get checkout working in this new template, we'll be going through a step-by-step guide of exactly how to get checkout working, and then at the very end, seeing that in real life with a couple of the variations with credit card and purchase order. So stay tuned because we're going to be jumping right into it. So before we get hands-on, let's go over high level what the steps are that we're trying to accomplish in this video. Setup step number one is we need to go through and actually create the integration classes. Now, lucky for us, we have some sample ones that we can go and access inside of the Salesforce repo, which we'll show here in a moment. Two is we actually need to register those as external services. So simply creating classes by themselves doesn't do it. We actually need to register them. Third, we need a payment adapter if we plan on using credit card as a payment option. And fourth, we need to make sure that our user has all the access to actually get in the storefront and go to checkout, along with all the data to actually get products into a cart and into checkout. So with that, let's dive into the hands-on now. Here we are back in our Salesforce Mojo instance, and you can see we have our new LWR B2B store here. And let's first start by navigating over into administration. Now, you can see this one's still under construction, so we still need to finish a couple of the steps in order for this to be fully functional. And one of those steps that's really important is the integrations. Now, at this point, we probably could get our storefront working in the sense of being able to go and browse products and see prices on there, but we'll never make it past the actual checkout process here until we get integrations figured out. Every store has to have at least some default integrations if you're using a lot of the standard components. So if we go down to our store inventory, tax, shipping, price check, and card gateway, we'll notice that each one of these has no integration selected. And what that means is we need to go through the Apex creation process for our integrations, and we need to register them in order for them to show up in our instance. Now, if I were to go here and click link integration, you'll see that I actually already have a couple in here from some previous videos. However, we're going to go through and set up some new ones so that you can see that process live with me here now. Now let's hop over into the B2B Commerce Lightning Quick Start repo that Salesforce maintains. We're in a couple of the folders here. One of them is underneath the Checkout Integration Classes subfolder here. And this is a really good starting place if you've never worked with the integrations before. If you scroll down, you can see that you have examples of every single integration that we're going to use today. With a couple different variations for different ones. So if we were just to hop into the B2B tax sample, for instance, now these integration classes are implemented in a very specific way. So you can see that this B2B tax sample implements the class SFDC checkout with the method cart tax calculation here. So if you're trying to create your own Apex class from scratch and you're having issues, that's probably why it does need to have specific things in it in order for it to work and be able to register and integrate. And so you can see in this one, we have a lot of the structure in place for us. However, you could modify this if you wanted to. If we scroll down here a little further, you can see that we have an example service that we're reaching out to calculate taxes. So you can, in theory, register your own here and utilize your own service and or do something else inside of the instance if you'd like. So this is a really good starting place. So my suggestion is to take these into the instance and use these out of the box and get your checkout working first, and then start to modify from there in order to have a stable starting place. So because I've already done a lot of this in our instance, if we hop back over into our org, that's why we're seeing a lot of these integrations. However, simply putting them in the instance as an Apex class isn't enough. So let's hop over into Workbench and I'll show you exactly what this looks like. So I'm in Workbench here in our instance, and if I just start with a quick query, I can come over here and I can find all of my classes because I labeled them all with B2B pretty quickly. And so you can see that we have one of each and then two delivery ones for a use case I did in a previous video here. And we're going to need all of these Apex IDs in order to register them. So let's keep this here, and I'm going to duplicate this tab and we'll open up a new one. And what you're going to want to do is go over to data and into insert here, and we're going to find a object called registered external service. And we'll do a single rec, and we'll kind of do this one at a time here. And it has a couple of mandatory fields. And one of the key ones here is that ID. So we're going to grab our sync B2B delivery and drop that over here. Now, there's a couple of options you have here for the developer name and master label. Those can be whatever you want. So in our case, we'll probably do like LWR shipping, and we'll probably do the same thing for the master label here. However, the external service provider type does need to be a specific value, otherwise it won't show up in the selection you need. So in this case, because we're dealing with the delivery or shipping one, it's a little confusing because they call it delivery, but what actually needs to be called in the provider type here is shipment. So we'll go ahead and click confirm, and we'll go ahead and do this again for a couple of the other ones, and I'm going to do it each individually here so you see each one of them coming across. So we'll do pricing next. We'll put the ID in first here, and then we'll do LWR price and do the same thing down here, price. And this one needs to be called price, which makes sense. And then we'll go down to tax. Taxes type is simply just tax, as you would imagine. And LWR tax. And we'll do our last one here, which is inventory. And this one is just inventory as well. All right, now that we have all of those created here, the next step here is just to validate that we actually have what we need. So the easiest way to do that is to hop back over into our query, and now we're going to change this to say, I just want all the information about the registered external service, and query that. And you can see in my instance, I have a ton of them because I've done this a couple times before. But you can see we have all of our LWR ones, which are formatted very nicely here for us at the top. And once we have this, now what we need to do is we need to go over into our store, and we actually need to start linking them. So if we hop back over into Salesforce here, and we'll just refresh the page so we grab the latest information, and we'll start with inventory and click link, you can see that we have our LWR inventory available for us. We'll go ahead and click confirm on all of these through each one of them. Tax for the LWR tax here, and shipping calculation, price check, and that takes care of all of our integrations. I will make one more note. We mentioned earlier that a couple of the actual integrations use some of Salesforce's demo Heroku instances that basically give you default information so that they work. Because of that, you do need to make sure you go into your setup if you're planning on using these, and go to your remote settings, and make sure that you put one in here for the B2B commerce-test.herokuapp.com, and make sure that's actually in here. Otherwise, you will have issues trying to get the integrations to run correctly. So that's a key piece of this. So now that we have that, our next step here is to get our card payment gateway working. Now, in most cases, you're probably going to want credit card. You may not, and there are other options for you. However, in this video, we're going to cover card and purchase order because those are the two that come out of the box with the dual payment component that comes inside of the LWR template. So if we navigate over into the card payment down here, we can see if we click link, I already have one called Stripe because I've done this, like I mentioned in past videos. So I could click the little plus right here and make that work, and it would all be fine. However, for our video today, I'll kind of go through the steps again. So what we'll do is we'll actually hop back over into our Git repo again that Salesforce provides us, and we'll go through the Stripe pieces just so you understand it. The Stripe integration requires 3 different classes. It requires the actual Stripe adapter here, which does all the implementation of the payment gateway adapter that Salesforce has. and actually does all the auth captures and does all the methods that are needed, including capturing the information. It does require, however, a query utilities and a Stripe validation exception. So when you go to the repo here, which I'll make sure is in the description here if you don't already have access to it, and you will need to actually create Apex classes for each one of these. So that's step one. Once you've done this, then you will go back over into your settings and go to setup, and you'll go over to name credentials. And you'll see that I have one called Stripe Adapter name credential here. Now inside of this name credential here, we're using the name principal password authentication. You can see that it's using a username in here. You can go to Stripe, get a free account, and get your own username, and that's what you would use to put in here in order for this to be successful, and you would also be putting in a password as well that you get from that. So once you have the actual Apex classes in here and you have the name credential, we're ready to move on to our next step. And that next step here is to jump over into Workbench. We're going to do the same type of thing we did on the integration, which is we're going to query for our Apex class so we can find the ID. We'll grab that ID right here and we'll hop back over into our second tab, go to data. Instead of going to the registered external service, we're going to be going to payment gateway provider, and we'll single record here. And what you would do here is you would put in your ID and you'd put in your developer name and master label. Now, because I've already used this Apex class for my Stripe one that already exists, it's not going to let me do that, but I'm going to try just so you guys can see that. And we'll come over here and do LWR Stripe and click insert, and it's going to say, oh, you can't do this because this is a duplicate of the existing payment gateway provider. So if I really wanted to in here, I could create another Apex class that was called something different and use that as part of the adapter. But for the sake of the kind of learning through this video today, I've stepped through all the pieces here, so we'll just use our existing one. So once we have that gateway provider registered correctly, then we're going to hop over into Salesforce and we'll go into Payment Gateway. And Payment Gateway is already going to have a record because I've already done this. But if you were doing this for the first time, you'd click New here, you'd give it a name, you'd select the gateway provider, which would be Stripe, and you would select the merchant credentials, which is the name credentials, just called a little differently here. You'd click that, and you'd click Active, and you'd click Save. Now I've already done that because, as I mentioned, I've already set this up, but that is actually the last step we need. And once we have this record here, we can hop back over into our instance, go to the card payment gateway here, click the plus, click next, and confirm. And now we've successfully linked our Stripe adapter into our store. Now, because this is a brand new store, what we're gonna have to do is a little bit of the pre-setup before we actually go into the storefront. So what we'll need is to make sure that we have products that have price books and are attached to categories. We'll need to make sure we have an actual account in here that is part of the buyer groups and is a buyer account in our store. We'll need to re-index the store, and we'll need to make sure that the navigation is set up correctly inside of Experience Builder. So I'm going to go through some of those steps here. If you have any questions about how to do those pieces, I've covered all those topics in previous videos, which I'll link kind of at the top right here, so you can go back and see some of that. But nothing is different with this LWR template with all those pieces. It's just kind of, this is a new store, so we need to get those set up. All right, before we actually hop into the final demo of all of this working, I thought it would be good to cover the actual Experience Cloud checkout page. So I covered this in a previous video, but now we're here again trying to set this full thing up. Now this checkout page has a couple of different sections here that are pretty powerful, but it is very different than the Aura based checkout. So again, all of the checkout stuff happens right inside Experience Builder with underlying data and integrations as we just were setting up. We no longer have to work in Flow to do this. However, this means that you're really limited to what you can do on the page here. So let's talk about what you can do on the page. So within checkout, you have this checkout wrapper components. In LWR, it's called a slot component. which basically means you can put more components inside of that component. So you can see inside of checkout, I have a shipping address component here that comes out of the box. Now, this top level wrapable component has two different types. It has a one-page type and it has an accordion type. So you can see that it actually changes the look and feel of it. And now instead of seeing everything on a single page, we're seeing the accordion. Now, it's kind of TBD on what will be best for you, because it's going to depend on, do you use the standard capabilities here? Are you augmenting it? And do you want the look and feel to be specific in a single way? So you're able to choose either one of these. The capabilities of how you use them and how the components interact with each other is a little bit different. So you'll have to watch my other video on creating custom components inside of LWR to learn more about that. But I'll link that up here in the top right in a moment. But let's go through the components real quick. So we have our shipping address component. Now you can see that we're showing a couple of different attributes on the right-hand side over here to show in this section. So you can make modifications to that. You can see that this looks a lot different than the standard one in Aura. So we have the ability to see everything inside of these little tiles that are nice looking here, with the default one signified as well. And we have the ability to create new addresses straight from checkout, which is definitely an improvement in quality of life here. I will show one little nuance that's different between Aura and LWR when we get into checkout around shipping, because it is a little bit different from the Aura version of this. But as we scroll down, the next component here is shipping method. And the shipping method doesn't really have a whole lot of configuration. It actually has no attributes you can configure here, but this actually selects all the shipping methods that are available inside of your instance based on the shipping adapter that we've put in here. So all those pieces, like I mentioned in the integrations, need to be working in order for this to pull up correctly. And the last section we have here is payment. Now on our page right now, what we have is the dual payment component, which gives us the ability to select between credit card and purchase order. And you'll see that actually come to life here when we go into the demo. But if you're only wanting to use credit card, for instance, you could come over to components and you could pull on the standard payment. And payment is just the credit card one. So you do have that capability, and you also have the capability to pull over the purchase order component as well individually if you only wanted one of those. And each one of those has a little bit of customization that you can do in here as far as headings go. However, there isn't a whole lot you can do out of the box, because this pulls from all the integrations, payment integrations that we just set up a moment ago. I will say that the payment component here handles the payments very differently. So if you're using the credit card, which we'll go through an example of, it will actually create what we call an order payment summary. And that creates a record against the order summary that stores all the details and the authorizations and the amounts. If you're using purchase order, all it does is store the purchase order number in the default purchase order field inside of the order summary and all the other records that are associated with it, which is the minimum you need, that purchase order number. But I've talked to a lot of customers who want a uniform way to be able to handle payments with purchase order and other methods. And so there are ways to get purchase order and other alternative payments into that order payment summary. However, it's not super easy right now. So just a caveat there, and I'll show the two different examples of that in a moment. But now that we've kind of gone through each one of those components, those are the standard ones, we can now go and see this in real life with one of our customers. Now you can see that we obviously need to go through and do a little bit of branding here, but we are logged in as Howard now inside of our storefront. We do see that products are up here on the top section, and if we click into it, we can see 6 products right now, which is all of our tiny home products we set up in a previous video. So I'm going to go ahead and add the drop-in sync into our cart. And once that adds here successfully, we'll view our cart and we'll move into checkout. Now, there are a couple of things that could happen here. And I think okay, perfect. So we actually got the error I was hoping to get here. And you can see that it's saying you couldn't proceed with checkout because there's no safe shipping addresses or you don't have the necessary buyer permissions to add one. Well, this is kind of a little bit of a false positive here. So if we go back into Howard's record and back to Acme, which is the company, you can see that we do indeed have a shipping contact point address, which is what this is pulling in from. So let's go ahead and click into this, and you can see that this is using an address with the United States, actual vernacular here for the country. So if we were to go ahead and change this to US and save this, let's go back over into our checkout experience and refresh. You can see that it pulls over completely fine. And it actually does show as United States here in the shipping address. So a little bit of a tidbit there that the way the template renders the shipping address is different than how the Aura one did. So it does expect the abbreviation version of the country, not the full version of it. The other thing I'll mention as well while we're talking about contact point addresses is that the billing contact point address isn't required in this checkout. Shipping is still required, as you saw here a moment ago, but the billing address is not required by default. So just a little bit of tidbit there on some of the errors you might get in checkout and how to resolve them. But you can see now that shipping is successfully loading here. We have our delivery methods here, which are linked back to our delivery methods inside of the instance. And you can select either one of these. And then we have our payments down below. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the credit card. So let's go ahead and put the credit card information in. This is just a sample credit card that you can use for Visa. Put my name in, and it just needs an expiration date that is in the future and any security code right here. And we'll go ahead and use same as shipping address, and we'll place the order. And if we've set up everything correctly, we should get an order confirmation screen here in just one moment. And there we go. I do not want to save that. And let's hop over into our instance again. We'll go into order summaries, and we have this latest one pinned with the latest one at the top here. And we can see that we have our order summary right here at the top, and it has a drop in sync with all the right prices. And if we scroll down, we can see that we have the order payment summary. And if we dive into that, you can see that it has all the things related to it. And this is where it gets a little complex inside of the payment pieces of it. But we have an authorization record. It's been authorized for the full amount here. And we have the payment gateway log, which details out exactly what transacted here and the response and all the information from Stripe. So that is perfect. It's exactly what we wanted here. Now let's go through this one more time with PO because I want to show you the difference with that. So we'll go back over into our products, and this time what we'll do is we'll do our interior sliding barn door. Let's add that to our cart real quick. View our cart, go into checkout, and we'll scroll down to our purchase order. And we'll do a purchase order of 876 and click place order. And once we've done this, we'll get a confirmation here. We'll be able to go back over into order summaries, and we'll be able to see we have a second transaction here. And we'll scroll down. This is our interior barn door, and you can see that the order payment summary is not filled in. So this is what I was referring to earlier about that not being filled in here. It's really out of the box, only works with card. You can get it to work with alternative payments like purchase order, but you will need to customize a couple of areas. Where this information is stored, though, isn't by default on the page layout. So I'm going to use my Salesforce inspector just for right now, but you could pull this into the layout if you wanted. But if you go into Salesforce inspector and look at the purchase order number here, PO number, you can see that 876 is on the order summary. So you can bring that to the page layout and show that information if you are using that standard component. So that's a wrap on exactly how to set up checkout in LWR and all the steps required to get to the point where it is working and functioning. Overall, think that the setup process is very similar to Aura, but man, is the checkout process a lot smoother with a single page here. It does require a little bit of knowledge around what is capable and what is not inside of LWR, and it does require you to customize a little bit more on the LWC side if you do want to go outside of the bounds of what's standard here. But you saw me go through 2 checkouts in a matter of a couple of seconds, which is definitely awesome there. thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions or comments inside the video here. Click like if you like the video, and stay tuned for next week's video.